Thomas Aldridge's fingers traced the well-worn pages of his book, a faint smile playing on his lips as the morning light filtered through the small window of his cozy apartment. The city was just waking up, its hum barely audible over the soft snores of Buddy, the golden retriever curled up by his feet. Thomas cherished these quiet moments where time seemed to stand still, his worries dissolving amongst the words and the comforting weight of his loyal companion beside him. "All right, Bud," Thomas whispered, closing his book with a gentle thud. Time to go. Buddy's eyes fluttered open, and with a stretch that rippled through his glossy coat, he was on his feet, tail in a wagging frenzy. Together, they navigated the cramped quarters of their home, past the kitchenette with its lingering scent of last night's dinner, and to the door that led out into the bustling world beyond. On the streets, the city had burst into life. Cars honked, street vendors called out their wares, and people streamed past in a blur of color and purpose. Buddy maneuvered through the throng with a grace that belied his size, always a step behind Thomas, whose kind eyes missed nothing. They were an island of calm amidst the chaos, moving in unspoken harmony. As they reached the pier, the salty tang of the sea greeted them, mingling with the earthy smell of morning dew on wood. Seagulls cried overhead, circling the boats that bobbed gently in the water. Buddy's excitement was palpable, his body quivering with each new scent and sound. He greeted fellow commuters with a nuzzle or a playful bark, his brown eyes brimming with joy for the simple pleasures of their shared routine. "Morning, Mr. Aldridge," called a familiar voice from the crowd. It was Mr. Howard, the market owner, his jolly face breaking into a wide grin. "Morning, Howard," Thomas replied, raising a hand in greeting before turning his attention back to Buddy, who was now making friends with a small child giggling at his antics. "Island's calling, eh?" Mr. Howard chuckled, watching as Thomas secured Buddy's leash and led him towards the boat, the final leg of their daily pilgrimage to the place where man and dog could simply be, surrounded by the vastness of the sea and sky. The boat's engine hummed a steady rhythm as it cut through the water, the city shrinking behind them into a mosaic awakening life. Thomas stood at the stern, his gaze fixed on the horizon where the sky kissed the sea. Meanwhile, Buddy was a beacon of exuberance at the bow, his golden coat catching the early sunlight. Every now and then, he'd launch into a fit of barks, his tail wagging wildly as seabirds swooped close, taunting him with their freedom. "Seems like you found your calling as a sailor, haven't you, boy?" Thomas said. But the words lacked his usual warmth. His smile didn't quite reach his eyes. Buddy glanced back at Thomas, sensing the shift in his tone before resuming his watch. The wind carried the cries of the birds and the dog's joyful responses, creating a symphony of pure, untamed happiness. As the boat pushed forward, the cityscape faded, becoming nothing more than a memory against the vast canvas of blue. Normally, this was a moment Thomas treasured, standing alongside Buddy as they embraced the sea's boundless embrace. But today, something was amiss. On any other morning, he would have held a steaming cup of coffee, sipping between shared looks with his companion. Today, though, the paper cup sat abandoned on the kitchen counter, its contents untouched and growing cold. His hand, which should have been warmed by the cup, now rested on the railing, gripping it with an intensity that whitened his knuckles. Passengers milled about, some lost in conversation, others admiring the view. But Thomas seemed distant from it all, lost in a sea of thoughts that clouded his gentle demeanor. He would occasionally shake his head, as if to dispel the weight of his preoccupations, only to fall back into that distant stare once more. "Beautiful day for a ride, isn't it, Mr. Aldridge?" A voice called out, hoping to snag a slice of his attention. "Sure is," Thomas replied automatically, but his heart wasn't in it. The man looked back over the water, watching as Buddy continued to bark at the birds, unaware of the storm brewing within his human. The sun dipped low, casting an amber glow over the pier that had begun to empty. The last of the commuters trickled away, their footsteps echoing into the distance. Only Buddy remained, his golden fur taking on the hues of the sunset, his body tense with anticipation. His ears perked up at the sound of each approaching boat, only to droop moments later as passenger after passenger disembarked. None of them, Thomas, Buddy's tail, once a metronome of joy, now lay still, and his whines were carried off by the wind. The city lights flickered on one by one, stars imitating the night sky above, but the man with the short, graying hair and gentle smile was nowhere to be seen. Anxiety crept into Buddy's paws, rooting him to the spot where morning goodbyes were usually exchanged for evening greetings. "Still waiting, huh, boy?" Mr. Howard's voice broke through the twilight haze. He set down his box of unsold goods with a thud beside him. "Don't you worry. Thomas is probably just running late." But the hours stretched on, and the night grew heavy with silence. Even the sea seemed to hold its breath, the waves lapping quietly against the wooden posts of the pier. Morning arrived with a gray veil of mist hanging over the water. Buddy was there before the first streaks of dawn cracked the horizon, his gaze fixed on the path leading to the boats. The familiar chug of engines and the smell of salt air did little to lift his spirits. His brown eyes were clouded with concern. "Going back to the island today, Buddy?" The boat owner's voice held a note of surprise as he approached the loyal dog. The sight of the empty space beside Buddy, where Thomas should have been standing with a leash in hand, sent a ripple of worry through the man's heart. "Come on, then." He gestured toward the boat, and Buddy needed no further invitation. With a determined stride, he boarded the vessel, his nose to the breeze, scanning the expanse of water for any sign of his missing companion. "Never seen a dog so keen to find his owner," one of the regulars muttered as they watched Buddy take his place at the bow. There was a collective nod among the early passengers, each one touched by the display of faithfulness. As the boat cut through the waves, Buddy's stance was unwavering, his eyes never leaving the shore ahead. They all knew the bond between the man and his dog was strong, but this was devotion in its purest form. And as the island drew near, with no sign of Thomas in sight, Buddy's resolve only grew, a testament to the love he bore for the man who was much more than an owner. He was his world. The moment the boat's ramp touched the shore, Buddy leapt onto the dock with a sense of urgency that belied his usually serene nature. His paws hit the worn wood in rapid succession, the familiar sounds of the island doing nothing to ease his growing panic. He darted past the clusters of seagulls that squawked and took flight at his approach, their raucous cries fading behind him. Buddy charged through the narrow paths framed by overgrown foliage, each spot they had explored together, now a checkpoint in his frantic search. The small clearing where they'd shared lunches was empty, save for the fluttering butterflies that rose in a startled cloud as he passed. He sniffed the bench, the lingering scent of Thomas not enough to calm his racing heart. His favorite spots yielded no comfort, no sign of his beloved companion. The towering lighthouse stood silent, its beacon a false promise of guidance. With each fruitless search, Buddy's hope flickered and dimmed like a candle in the wind. His golden coat, usually gleaming in the sunlight, was now dulled by the shadows of worry that crept across the island. The air felt heavy, each breath a struggle against the growing despair that clung to his fur like burrs. Finally, he arrived at the willow tree, its branches weeping leaves onto the soft earth. This was their sanctuary, a place of stories whispered and laughter shared. Buddy approached, his body tense, nostrils flaring as he caught an unfamiliar scent mixed with the familiar. He began to dig, paws a blur of motion, dirt flying behind him as he unearthed the truth buried beneath. His whimpers cut through the stillness, a stark contrast to the peaceful rustle of the willow. And there it was, Thomas, lying still, the gray of his hair merging with the earth's palette. A silent scream filled the air, though no sound came from the dog's throat. His world shattered in that moment, his human, his friend, unmoving. Buddy lay down beside Thomas, his head resting on the chest that no longer rose and fell with breath. His whines were soft, a mournful song for the companion who had given him everything. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in hues of grief. Buddy stayed, his loyalty unyielding even in the face of death. The bond they shared transcended words, living on in the quiet sorrow of a loyal dog's vigil beside his fallen owner. As dawn painted the sky in soft blushes and golden streaks, Eleanor Ellie Hayes laced up her running shoes. Her routine jog led her through the winding paths of the island, a solace from the city's clamor. The whispering leaves and chirping birds were her companions until she spotted a figure by the willow tree. Buddy didn't notice Ellie approach. His eyes were fixed on Thomas, a silent sentinel to the last vestige of his world. Something primal in Ellie's heart twisted at the sight, human and animal united in a tableau of loss. "Hey there, boy," she whispered, kneeling beside Buddy, her voice a soothing balm. The dog's gaze lifted, meeting hers, and in his brown eyes, Ellie saw a well of sorrow that mirrored her own past griefs. With gentle hands, she stroked his golden fur, feeling him shiver under her touch. She pulled out her phone with her other hand, her fingers trembling slightly as she dialed for help. "Hello, police. There's been an accident," Ellie spoke into the receiver, her eyes never leaving Buddy's. Officers arrived, their presence a stark contrast to the morning's tranquility. Ellie stayed by Buddy's side, her presence a steadfast promise as strangers encroached upon his vigil. In the days that followed, Ellie couldn't shake the image of the loyal dog from her mind. She learned of Thomas's solitary life and how Buddy was left with no one to care for him. The decision came naturally. She would be the one to extend a hand to this creature who knew the ache of abandonment. "Come on, Buddy," she coaxed as they left the shelter where he had been temporarily housed. "Let's go home." Her apartment, once a shrine to solitude, now echoed with the soft patter of paws and the occasional contented sigh from her new companion. Their walks became a ritual, each step a stitch mending the tear in their hearts. The park, the riverbank, even the mundane streets. They explored together, finding solace in shared silence and simple wonders. Sometimes Ellie would catch Buddy pausing, his nose lifted to the wind as if searching for a familiar scent. She understood the look in his eyes, the yearning for what was lost. In those moments, she'd kneel beside him, her hand finding his head, grounding them both in the present. "Life has a way of going on, Buddy," she'd murmur. "We carry them with us, always." And so they moved through the days, the woman with cautious green eyes and the golden retriever with a heart full of loyalty. They were two souls, cast adrift by fate's cruel currents, finding harbor in each other. Together, they began to weave a tapestry of new memories, each thread a testament to the resilience of the brokenhearted and the unspoken covenant between human and animal. The market buzzed with the sounds of commerce and conversation, a symphony of life unfolding in organized chaos. Ellie moved through the stalls with Buddy at her heel, the dog's attention darting between the vibrant displays of produce and the passers-by. The air was rich with the scent of fresh bread and spices, a tapestry of aromas that usually set Buddy's tail wagging in sensory delight. But today, something shifted. Attention coiled in the golden retriever's posture as his gaze fixed on a figure rifling through a crate of apples. Marcus Flynn. The man's hand glinted, the sun catching on a ring that sent a jolt through Buddy's frame. A silver band etched with intricate patterns, unmistakably Thomas's. In an instant, the serene market scene ruptured into disarray. With a growl that rumbled from deep within, Buddy lunged, teeth bared and eyes ablaze, with a protective fury Eleanor had never seen. The ring had to be reclaimed. It was his. Thomas's, not this stranger's. "Easy, Buddy." Ellie's voice cut through the clamor, her hands scrambling to grasp his collar. But the dog was undeterred. Shoppers scattered, their cries punctuating the sudden tension as Mr. Howard emerged from his stall, his face a mask of concern. "Is everything okay, Miss Hayes?" he asked, his bushy eyebrows knitting together in worry. Ellie managed to wrestle Buddy back into submission, her own heart hammering. I'm not sure," she stammered, her eyes locked onto the ring that had sparked Buddy's outburst. Memories of Thomas wearing that very piece flooded her mind, igniting a spark of suspicion. Sorry about the fuss. She apologized to Mr. Howard, feeling the curious stares of the market patrons on her. Take care now, the kindly vendor said, returning to his customers. Once home, Ellie paced the living room, her thoughts racing as Buddy lay by her feet, the agitation still rippling through his body. That ring. It couldn't be a coincidence. She needed answers. Real ones. Okay, Buddy, she murmured, reaching for the phone. Let's find out what's going on. Her fingers dialed the familiar number of the local police station, asking for Officer Rachel Willis. The call connected, and Ellie's voice was steady, resolute. Officer Willis, it's Ellie Hayes. I think I might have something related to Thomas Aldridge's case. It's about a ring. Go ahead, miss. Hayes, came the officer's attentive response. Ellie recounted the incident at the market, how Buddy had reacted to the ring on Marcus Flynn's hand, the same ring Thomas always wore. There was a pause as the gravity of her words sank in. Thank you, miss. Hayes, we'll look into it immediately. Can you bring Buddy down to the station? He may help us verify some details. Of course, Ellie agreed, a mix of anxiety and determination settling over her. This could be the break they needed. The ensuing investigation unfolded with meticulous precision. Officer Willis's keen eye and relentless pursuit of truth uncovered the sordid tale. Jealousy and betrayal, a clandestine conflict rooted in envy and greed. Marcus Flynn, once a friend and confidant to Thomas, had let darkness overtake his soul. The evidence was undeniable. The ring, a silent witness to the tragedy it symbolized. And at the center of it all stood a loyal golden retriever, whose intuition had guided them toward justice, and a woman who had learned to listen to the whispers of a broken heart. As the gavel fell and justice claimed its due, Ellie looked down at Buddy. Together, they had unraveled a mystery that bound them ever closer. Two guardians of a memory, champions of a memory, champions of the truth that love, even when lost, never truly fades. Buddy's golden coat glistened in the warm light filtering through the window, casting an ethereal glow around him as he lay at Ellie's feet. The soft hum of the city outside faded into a distant murmur, a stark contrast to the tranquil oasis they now inhabited. His chest rose and fell with a rhythm, as steady as the ticking of the old clock on the mantelpiece, his breathing a silent testament to the serenity that enveloped them both. Ellie sat in her favorite armchair, a book lying forgotten in her lap, her gaze resting on Buddy. A small smile tugged at the corners of her mouth as she watched his eyelids twitch with the flickers of a dream. Perhaps he was chasing seabirds along the shore again. Or maybe he was back on the pier, waiting for Thomas, feeling the gentle sway of the floating docks beneath his paws. Peaceful, isn't it, Buddy? She whispered, her voice barely breaking the hush of the room. Buddy's ear twitched, acknowledging her words without stirring from his slumber. It had been a journey of shared silence and whispered confidences that brought them to this quiet moment, a bond forged in the aftermath of a loss that was both their own. The walls of the apartment, once echoing with the echoes of solitude, now spoke of a new chapter. The scattered dog toys, the extra leash by the door, the second water bowl, each a small yet profound change, marking their intertwined paths. Outside, life churned with its relentless pace. But inside, time seemed to stand still, honoring the memory of what was and the hope of what was yet to come. In the golden retriever's contented sighs and the woman's reflective gaze, the resilience of the human, animal bond shone like a beacon through the fog of past sorrows. They had found solace in each other, a mutual healing from wounds unseen but deeply felt. And as the day waned, giving way to the purple hues of twilight, Ellie knew that whatever fate had in store, they would face it together with the quiet strength that comes from knowing you are no longer alone.